What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are on episode 2 of the JK axle swap into my Jeep WJ. To catch you up on where we were at last time, let's go ahead and run through the upgrades we've already done. If you guys want to watch that video, I'll link it down below for you to check out. But let's go over those upgrades. In episode 1, you saw us install some lower control arm skid plates to stiffen up those lower control arms since we didn't swap them out. I wanted to add as much stiffness as possible to these lower brackets since we're going to be keeping them. Then you also saw us install some cam bolt delete plates so that we can use round bolts on those lower control arm brackets. And you also watched me install some sleeves into this Dana 30, which was probably the biggest mod we did in this last video. Between adding the sleeves and the truss kit that we'll be adding today, I think this housing will be plenty strong enough for what we're going to be putting it through. Then we went ahead and plug welded and then welded the end of these sleeves in place. So now that we're all caught up, let's go over what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be installing the JK Dana 30 Pro Series truss from Barnes 4-wheel drive. We're also going to be installing their upgraded track bar bracket. I wanted to go ahead and upgrade the track bar bracket while we were doing all of these upgrades anyway, and the axle was out from under the Jeep. The one that was on there originally had a slightly ovaled out hole. We probably could have fixed that. However, I figured we just upgrade while we're in there. The brackets are like $30, so I figured why not? With those two upgrades and the upgrades we did in the last episode, this housing should be pretty much ready to go back under the Jeep. We'll just have to reassemble the axle. Once all this is welded on, we're going to go ahead and give it a coat of Seymour paint. So I got their weld through primer. I've never tried that before, but I'm curious to see how that works. And then we got some of their high solids enamel. We got the matte black colorway, and I've actually used this on the Grand Cherokee project already on the inner fender liners, and this stuff laid down really well. So I think it's going to look really good on the axles. Plus, it'll be really easy to touch up once we scrape it on rocks and need to recoat the paint. Also, towards the end of the video, I'm going to give you guys a little sneak peek of some mods we have coming for this Dana 30 build, and it's going to be a really overkill Dana 30 setup, but we've partnered with some really cool brands to make this axle pretty unique and definitely one of a kind for the WJ setup. I haven't seen really anybody do it like this before. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that, but let's go ahead and get to work on this truss setup. So I've gone ahead and just assembled the truss on the axle to check fitments and everything like that. It's not welded and it's not tacked or anything like that, but you guys can see that the fitment on this is really nice, especially for such a cheap truss. That was my main concern. I've never used Barnes 4-wheel drive stuff before, but I've been impressed with all of the products we've been using on this project. Now, I do have to clean this truss up a little bit. It's been sitting around the shop for a little while, got a little rust, and we just want to prep it very good for welds. And then we got to go ahead and finish prepping the housing as well, clean it up, get it ready to weld. That way we can make this look as good as possible, especially for someone who is not a welder. I'm by no means a welder. I'm confident it'll stick together. This track bar bracket, we got to get good welds on because this is going to be a pretty important part. But it'll sit just like this, and as you can see, it's pretty hard to mess up. We are going to have to weld this bracket on first, and then we'll be able to weld the truss because we have a little bit of welding to do inside of where the truss will be sitting. But this was a very cheap upgrade, and I figured I had enough issues with the track bar setup on the Jeep. Now we'll go ahead and upgrade it with a better track bar bracket while we have the option. So I went ahead and removed the truss, and as you can see, there's a couple tabs we have to weld up. I'm going to go ahead and just tack this into place. There's really only one way to set on here. It's pretty easy. You just pretty much bump it up against that coil bucket, and then it's in place, ready to go. So now we've got that sort of welded, sort of tacked in place. As you can see here, I went ahead and welded that inside tab that we're not going to be able to access once we have the truss fully assembled. We went ahead and tacked the front panels on here, and then I went ahead and put the top piece on. We're going to tack everything into place before we weld it. Then we're going to pretty much transfer around the axle and weld in different spots. That way we don't warp the housing. Now with everything tacked into place, I'm going to go ahead and do all the welding we have to do on the inside first, and then we'll give it a coat of the weld through primer. I don't want it to rust in there, so we're going to go ahead and finish that up now. This weld through primer stuff I've never used before, but apparently we can lay this down and then we don't have to really sand it off or anything. We can just weld straight to it. For this whole project, I'm going to be using all Seymour paint. I've heard amazing things about this, so I'm excited to test it out for myself. So like I said, with everything tacked into place and pretty much well set up, all the tabs fit, we're going to go ahead and give our spray paint can a shake. And we'll give it a coating of this on the inside. That way we don't have to worry about rust in there too much. And now we've got a coat of this weld through primer on the inside. Now with that taken care of, we're going to go ahead and tack the top panel on. That way it doesn't move and all the tabs stay in place. And we're going to go ahead through and basically just weld it in sections. I don't want to put too much heat in the one spot on this housing because then you can run into issues with it warping. I think with the sleeve kit, it shouldn't be too big of a deal with it warping, but I just want to be extra careful there because I don't want to take that risk. Now we went ahead and got a lot of the sections welded up. Like I said, I'm no professional welder or anything like that. I'm very confident that the metal will stick together. However, it's not going to be the most beautiful, aesthetic pleasing welds. We also haven't welded the center cast section yet because I'm still waiting on a couple things to come in from Amazon. I'm waiting for the MAP gas torch, and then I'm also waiting for a temperature gun so that way we can check the temperatures. We have to preheat that cast section and then slowly cool it down with the torch. And then once we're about 200 degrees, we're going to go ahead and wrap it in a welding blanket. All right, so I wrapped up welding. We went ahead and gave it a final coat of the weld through primer. Once we weld that center cast section, we'll go ahead and just give it its final coat of the flat black. But for now, this should keep it from rusting. I think this stuff will be here tomorrow to weld that center section. So you will see that in the same video. I'll just cut to tomorrow for you guys. All right, so it's the next day and we've got our MAP gas torch and we got an extra can of gas. And then we also got our temperature gauge. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this to heat up this cast section in the middle. We gotta get this to about 400 degrees. Once it's 400 degrees, we can weld it and we'll be able to weld it to the steel that the truss is. The tricky part is going to be keeping it at that 400 degrees while we're welding. We're going to have to keep all sides of it about the same temperature. Then once it's done, we're going to have to check the temperature with this temperature gun and slowly bring it back down to about 200 degrees. And at 200 degrees, we'll wrap it in a welding blanket and let it cool the rest of the way down. Now, if we mess this step up or we let it cool down too fast, the metals will contract at different speeds and these welds will pop. It's the difficulty of welding to a cast center section versus welding to the steel tubes. This is definitely the harder of the two. So I'm going to start by heating this up with the MAP gas torch, and I don't know really how long this will take to get it to the 400, but 400 is our goal temperature here. We want to get it to right about there, and periodically we'll go ahead and check it with this temperature gun. Now, I did pick up the temperature gun off of Amazon. If you don't have one, I definitely recommend getting one for this. This is definitely not something that you really want to mess up, and I think it was like 10, 15 bucks. So really affordable, and it's nice to know that you're not really going to screw anything up in this step, because it is a pretty important step. In a lot of trusses, this is pretty structural. In our situation, it's not as much, but in some trusses, it's definitely important. So after a few more minutes, we got it to our desired temperature here. We're right about 400, 380 to 400 in different spots. So now we're gonna go ahead and begin welding. Now, like I said, we're periodically going to check it and we're going to make sure it's staying right around 400. If it's not, we're going to go ahead and grab our torch again and we're going to heat it back up and keep it at that temperature. That way it doesn't cool while we're welding and nothing pops or cracks. If one of these welds pops, we will definitely hear it. It's a really loud ping sound. And now back to welding. We're just going to repeat these steps until we're done. And now that everything is going to be welded up, we're going to repeat the step of using the MAP gas torch and we're going to go ahead and keep it slowly going down in temperature. And now that we've hit 200, we're going to go ahead and wrap it in this welding blanket. Now we're just going to let it sit and slowly come back down to room temperature. It's like 70 out today, so it'd probably take a couple hours to get back down to that. Once it's back down, we'll go ahead and give this a coat of paint. We'll get it coated in primer, and then we'll get it coated in that paint we got from Seymour. And then we'll be ready to reassemble this axle, which I'm really excited for because that's when it'll start to kind of come back together. All right, so it's been a couple hours now. I finished a project on the Wrangler and this thing's finally cooled back down. So we'll go ahead and remove this welding blanket and check our welds. I didn't hear any pops, but I wasn't always around it. But with that removed, the welds may not be the prettiest, but it does look like we got pretty good penetration on both sides from what I can tell. Again, I'm no expert, but I'm pretty sure this will hold. Front and back, none of our welds cracked. I did kind of leave a couple spots that I didn't weld that I couldn't really get to easily, but I think we should be good to go. I welded on top, back side, front side, and I think we're good. None of them popped, so I'm really happy with that. And really, I guess time will tell if our welds were strong enough and if they'll hold. I'm pretty confident in them though. But let's go ahead and move this axle outside and we'll get the final coat of paint on here. We'll get it primed, get it painted, and then we'll be ready for reassembly. So like I said earlier, we're going to be using this Big Rig primer from Seymour. It's laying down really, really well on everything else that he's doing, so I think it'll give us a really nice finish on this axle. That weld through primer did great, by the way. So we got our first and final coat of primer all laid down. Now we're going to go ahead and hit it with the flat black paint here, and this definitely gives a good finish. I went with flat black instead of gloss, and I think this will look really, really well when we install it under the Jeep with some of the other parts that'll be going on this setup once you see them. And now we've got a fully painted, trussed, sleeved, and kind of built Dana 30. So let's go over all the mods we did to this thing. So obviously we have the lower control arm skid plates, the cam bolt deletes, we've got sleeves, we've got gussets, and we've obviously got the truss on it. So the housing itself is pretty strong, and I'm pretty confident when we put it under the WJ, it'll hold up for quite some time. It's also crazy how good this axle looks compared to when we started. I'll go ahead and put a picture up on screen if I can find one of what we started with and what we have now. Now, for those of you who have stuck around for the end of the video, I'll give you guys a little sneak peek of what you guys can expect in the next episode of this Dana 30 build. Some of the really cool upgrades we have for this, the steering I'm most excited for. It's really overkill for a Dana 30. However, we're also going to be doing a Rubicon axle build in another project, and I need steering for that as well. And this will work in both axles, so we'll go ahead and swap it over to that. So we partnered with a really cool brand called Apex Chassis. They make steering, ball joints, all kinds of things like that. We're going to be running their 2.5-ton aluminum steering setup on this axle. I love the aluminum steering on my Wrangler. I want to do something similar. We got brand new knuckles. We got Gatekeeper Offroad steerable lights for those knuckles as well. Then we got a couple other really cool products we're going to be using on this axle setup. So I'm really excited to see this come together. Next episode, we'll be putting this axle back together. Everything will be basically brand new except for axle shafts. I might replace those. I haven't fully decided yet. We're going to be replacing pretty much everything else besides carrier, ring and pin in, and axle shafts. Everything else is brand new, ready to go. So this axle should be ready to go wheeling once we get underneath of the Jeep. After that, we're going to be building the rear Dana 44 for the setup, installing an iron rock off-road truss that will allow us to swap that into the back with the 4-link brackets and everything like that. That axle is not going to be built too much currently. I might eventually buy a Rubicon locker since it is the Dana 44. I believe that'll work flawlessly and go in it very easily. Then we'll at least have a rear locker. I don't really want to put a locker in the front Dana 30. People say they do it and it works fine. However, we're already going to be pushing it on 37s and I want this axle to last at least a year. That way we can, make some cool content with this Jeep. This Jeep hasn't really gone wheeling too much and I really want to get it on the trails. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you guys in the next one. I'm super excited for this project and I hope you guys are as well.